speak and fix these situations?
Great. I think at the police, at the level of systems and institutions, our police have done a good job by actually separating the whole department of the victim-friendly system or unit to then deal with cases of gender-based violence for men and women. There's also the public relations department that does the counseling for men and women. But I think you know very well that, Ken, is that we are human beings. You know, when you walk in there, you are like me, 1.8 meters tall. And my wife is as short as, 1.5, slim, and then ovati, and even pasina kutotaura kaluka vanongoita so pareception kuti waziona seidzi ndo dzashaiwa parinenge zimonya one. The whole system of getting help should then be friendly. It's different when you walk in there and wataura kuti ndabirwa mombe dzangu ndane mombe 20 wakomana ndabirwa mombe 19 ndasara ne1. All police officers jump, but vafamba sei mbavha dzandiwa nani, who do you suspect, and blah blah blah. The kind of support, the kind of talk, that kind of expression that you get from the police should make you comfortable to tell your story, to report the story, and for other men to report their stories. So I think it's a gap that exists, and I think as development partners we should partner more, the police, the judiciary system, our parliament, so that we begin to debunk, unmask. It's good that we've got COVID-19. So for the police type, we have to unmask the aspect where we view men as immortals, men as people who cannot show emotions, men as people who cannot, have those kind of problems where they feel that the space, the domestic space, the work space is violating my human rights, especially in the context of gender-based violence.
Now, Tembani, I should have asked this at the beginning. Are you part of the Mugota initiative?
Yes, I am.
You are. Wonderful. Now, how supportive is such a space when it comes to discussing these issues, especially for victims, just from what you've seen with your interactions?
It has been very supportive, Candice, particularly at both institutional level and even at national level as the whole Mugota initiative, right? So at institutional level, you find that there are many guys who can come up with their own problems. They can either choose to remain anonymous to receive that kind of help anonymously, or you can also converse with everyone else within that Mugota group. And you find that every person who is in the group will probably relate to those stories, and they'll probably do their best in terms of helping you get the kind of access that you are supposed to receive. We've had numerous sessions even in our own Mugota institutional group, right, where we talk about where we can access services, the kind of services that we're able to access, the idea being to give the kind of information and to also promote help-seeking behavior amongst guys. And at the national level, again, there's also been so much support, particularly from SAYWAT, support in terms of helping us to also access the kind of services that we need, access the kind of information that we need, and even in terms of empowering ourselves in order to also be able to respond to our own problems. Yeah.
All right. Sandisa, do these platforms provide counseling?
Yes, they provide counseling. We internally provide counseling through our call center, which is telecounseling. That's one route. And then we also have a whole list of our partners so that we create an ecosystem of help around the young men. So we refer some of the cases to some of our partners like PSZ, like PSI, like the New Start Center. You will see that the package of counseling is the same for men and women.
Okay.
But the perception has been that it's only women who need counseling. But you will discover that when you go to a professional counselor, they can still deal with a man the same way they will deal with a young woman, depending on the case presented. So, firstly, there is internal processes of counseling. But in cases where we feel and think that this case might need more help, more protection, more services, because we have basically three routes.
Yes.
There is the legal route, there is the medical route, and then there's the psychosocial route. So we then do some case profiling, and then the case takes its own route, and then you get the necessary support.
Maybe just for information's sake, take us through the different cases that you've mentioned. Just give us examples of what would determine a legal case. Just break that down for us a bit more.
That's fine. So there can be a case where the young man or a young woman is in conflict with the law. So for example, it can be a case of sexual harassment, and that young person who is at a university has reported her case of sexual harassment, and they need legal representation. Because when you report a case at university level, they establish what is called a disciplinary committee, depending on the structure of the university. And then you have to go there, sit there, and state your facts or points. Sometimes you might need legal representation because there's a whole lot of legal jargon. You're dealing with a person who is economically empowered. They'll bring their own lawyer. So we have to push to get partners who will say, okay, Timbani is going to a disciplinary committee, they need legal support. So that is lawyer to lawyer and perpetrator to survivor.
Okay.
That kind of arrangement. If it's medical, there are cases where there can be sexual violations that we want, for example, emergency contraception. That is supported also through our partners such as our Dr. Clinic, Population Service Zimbabwe, so that is because it's quite time-bound medical services. And then there are other services medically that will need more time. Those ones we can probably be supporting through the college clinic. And then in terms of when a person has been exposed to trauma, depression, or just the environment not being comfortable, those cases will go through counseling. At university level, they've got counselors who sit in the student affairs department. But sometimes we then profile the case and say, the student is not comfortable with a university-provided counselor. They want an external counselor for one reason or the other. We then link to provide a full sessions of counseling until the case is logically closed.
All right. All right, so we are taking a very quick break. When we come back, we're looking at the effects of the lockdown on GBV, especially in Zimbabwe. So don't go away. Now, this broadcast is brought to you by Zimpapers Television Network in partnership, of course, with the Spotlight Initiative, the Swedish Embassy, UNFPA, and Say What. We will be back shortly.
Life will never be the same again.
Absolutely. No. How to tell someone in Bari or in Soweto that they should exercise social distancing?
Every single one of us, barring a few, are praying more.
What is the health economic cost of what we are trying to achieve?
I don't know whether his chairman knows he runs at about 9 in the morning.
Yeah, I've just got the symptoms, so I just called the doctor and and then he just advised me to have to stay at home, eh?
Welcome back. Now, of course, this year's campaign has come at a time when we're grappling the world over with the COVID-19 pandemic. And this pandemic has also brought with it unprecedented challenges when we look at, the fight against gender-based violence. Now, according to UN Women, as the world retreated inside our homes due to the lockdown measures introduced to curb COVID-19, reports showed an alarming increase in the statistics of reported cases of the already difficult pandemic of violence against women and girls in Zimbabwe. Cases of GBV doubled in Zimbabwe. This is according to Musasa director Precious Taru. Let's take a look at what she has to say.
We've seen a spike in gender-based violence cases. Why do we say so? Because we've been comparing our own internal data. If you look at the period between January to March, we recorded around 5,500 cases. Then we went into the second quarter, April to June. The numbers doubled. We recorded around 10,548, if I'm not mistaken, but I know it was over 10,000. Then between July to the third week of September, we are over 11,000. So if it's a graphical presentation, you can see that there's a line in terms of the increase in number of cases. The cases keep on increasing. I think in terms of the legislative environment, we are appealing to the committee that it pushes forward the minimum mandatory sentence on rape, because this has been one of the most prevalent forms of abuse that women and girls are going through. It's something that is worrying, because as much as there are deterrent sentences that are being given in court, those inconsistencies in terms of one judge gives you 10 years, the other one gives you 1 year, is disheartens women, because they then don't understand how it's classified that this rape was more brutal than the other. So it's something that we are appealing, Kuti, if they could look at a minimum mandatory sentence.
All right, Sendisa, so cases doubled during lockdown. It's almost unfathomable. I think we had made some form of progress and now we seem to have gone backwards.
Yep.
But perhaps now would be a good time to kind of look at some of the key causes of GBV. What would some of these issues be that have now been exacerbated by lockdown?
I think one of the fundamentals that has been presented by the lockdown has been people have been restricted to move, which is number one. That means, Candice, if you were at the University of Zimbabwe and I'm your, I will say, stepfather, brother, stepbrother, sekuru, kanachi, ndiri kuchitungwisa. And then once iwewe tavhara university, chiinda kumba kuchitungwisa kunogara na sekuru, anga vachiabuse. Hatina kaseta pakatobuda kekuti you have prolonged time with the same perpetrator in the same space. So there's potential of recurrent abuse in that space. So ultimately, sometimes universities, schools, open spaces have been outlets for young people to run away and go, at least the vakumba ndazokera kuchikoro nambotiza space here. That's one level. The second level is that if you look at the restrictions, they have affected the operations of NGOs. So in terms of people giving information, people giving services, people pointing out on gender-based violence and continuously pushing communities to speak out and to shun gender-based violence. So that has been kind of scaled down. Was at first when COVID-19 came through, everyone ran away, including yourselves, journalists who said,
Right.
But in the whole process, takango wanda, tuku wanda is the wandering place, wanda pasho, very safe for men, women, girls, boys in our own spaces. So that's why we begin to see some of these cases rising now. And there is an upsurge again now in terms of social media abuse.
Okay.
Observe that cyberspace has not been so safe for most of our young people, because people have been restricted to move, no school, no university, and a lot of cyberbullying has been happening. So that also can trigger a lot of reporting and cases can go up.
All right. Now, one of the biggest elements that has come out in these abuse cases has, of course, been the sexual aspect. Now, the scary thing that is coming to light, especially during lockdown, is it's no longer the normal, per se, structure where it was men attacking women or women attacking men, you now also have same-sex attacks. You have men attacking men and women attacking women as well, and that element has come into play. How would you say this has affected the dynamics of you trying to deal with your peers as students, especially during lockdown, Tembani?
Okay, so particularly what was unfortunate during the lockdown period was that we did not have much physical interactions with our peers. They were locked down in their own places, right? And as you have said, the whole dynamic of gender relations have shifted. It's no longer just women attacking women, men attacking men, for all sorts of reasons that could also be gendered, to even include men who have sex with men as well, which are also very important to consider. So particularly how this has affected even our whole interactions with men is that at first, we find an upsurge in the exposure of most men to instances of vulnerability and instances of violence. And secondly, the kind of structures that they had, that they depended on in terms of getting the kind of help they needed, or even in terms of general networking, and even in terms of conflict management that we also give each other as students, are things that have also been upset. So it particularly means that there was now a need to rethink our approaches as men in relation to how we are able to solve those problems that we are interacting more frequently in our society.
All right. And what are some of the solutions that could come about, especially tackling that? Because it is difficult to say I was attacked by a woman, but I can't imagine it's any easier to say I was attacked by another man. Sendisa, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, it's a multi-million-dollar question, Candice. But of course, I think the starting point is we have to repackage our the way we reach out to men and women who need help in terms of gender-based violence. So, for example, now we have to move quickly and strategically into the digital space, so that it provides that safety net for men and women, including children who have been exposed to violence. So, for example, we must have a lot of toll-free lines where different populations can access. We must have a lot of mobile services that will be allowed to move into communities to reach out to those who cannot probably be on digital spaces, those who do not have phones to call. That's another approach. We have to reorganize our people to have more productive conversations on platforms such as Facebook. If you look at it, most of us, converse on Facebook.
Yeah.
And the way we do say things or perpetuate certain norms and values that are negative to our community as if it's just normal. So pick it up and then so the digital space has not integrated social behavioral change communication, especially by partners, and that's very important. And we have to make safe digital spaces because they almost like reflect our reality outside the digital space. Yes. as organizations. So those are some of the things that we can begin to look at. But more importantly, let's begin even for our development partners to fund models that are promising. For example, you have got this promising model of young men in universities called Mugota. That's a unique niche to have young men who begin to understand and appreciate and articulate with a lot of clarity how we can stop gender-based violence.
All right.
So the more we fund these models that are promising, the more we do and replicate them in other different spaces.
Thank you for actually bringing up Mugota once again, because I think now would be a really good time for us to get a bit more insight into how Mugota works. So let's just quickly pay attention to this video as Say What explain to us how Mugota really works.
My name is Leo Munyono from Say What, Manicaland. I'm here today under the Action for Choice project, where we have young men under the Mugota platform. They've been doing dialogues during this event, and they've been talking to young men of their age, talking about different issues of sexual and reproductive health. We are emphasizing that young men, male students, are partners and supporters for young women or female students to access sexual and reproductive health services. These dialogues are meant to promote positive choices amongst young men, we are especially saying young men should not be perpetrators of sexual harassment. Young men should not be perpetrators of gender-based violence within the college environment. So we are saying young men should be supporters for female students. Young men should help in creating a conducive environment where female students are comfortable and safe to access sexual and reproductive health services. The dialogues have been taking place in a very unique way. You see this combi behind me. The young men, you know, can do dialogues here, and they are also doing the dialogues outside this combi. Each time they see this combi moving within the college environment, they see it as a symbol of young men's pride, and they take it as a symbol of advocacy for positive programs that promote female students' participation. And Manicaland State University of Applied Sciences is so proud to be part of this project, which so far has promoted positive participation from the male students, especially in as far as the access to HIV services is concerned, the promotion of gender-based violence-free environment is concerned, as well as the improved access to contraception.
All right, so basically this is a brief into how Mugota works, but you too have been part of the experience, and I want to know the changes that this experience has brought for you mentally, in terms of just how you look at GBV issues towards both women and girls as well as young men and boys. Beloved, let me start with you.
Okay. On my side, I've learned a lot of stuff through Mugota, as a lot of education on women have been disseminated to us as male students, and there are some areas where we didn't know that in doing so we were committing crime and we were doing what is wrong and so forth. And through Mugota, they came and taught us that doing something like this, or for example, just calling women names that the lady that you are calling that name is not interested in so doing, it's a crime. We were not aware of all this before Mugota came in. And at the same time, there are issues that we face as men that we cannot share with the outside just because we are men. And you know what, in Mugota, it's like we have accountable partners, somebody whom we can go to amongst us as peers and just say, you know what, I faced A, B, C, D, how can I go about it? And if my peer cannot help me to go through that problem, he can take me further to responsible authorities within the Mugota structure. So it has been of great help to us as students, and we thank Sewat for bringing that initiative.
All right, Tembani?
For me, I would start by saying that it made me a very tolerant individual, because particularly when you grow up in a very intolerant society that has a certain set of rules and standards and sort of determines how you're supposed to have an outlook of the world, it means that even my whole perception of individuals who have been victimized or individuals who continue to be victims of gender-based violence was also quite warped and also conform to those standards. So it made me into an individual who's now able to also tolerate, to also understand, and to also empathize with those kinds of abuses. And secondly, just as importantly as well, I would say that Mugota has also made me into an open individual who's also willing to share some of the experiences I have in relation to issues of gender-based violence and sexuality. Was noting that we live in Zimbabwe, like there are so many young people who have problems that they don't have anywhere else to share them, no way to receive any kind of support or any help. Just a couple of weeks ago, we saw on social media a person who was silent with a sexually transmitted infection and received no help until it had become serious. So Mugota has become that space where even I myself, growing up in a very intolerant society, can also be able to open up about whatever issues that affect me and find help immediately.
All right, wonderful. Now, as we speak of this, it leads me to my next question. How do we have these discussions? How would we promote these discussions that actively look at changing mindsets, not just of, because now we must understand that while men are viewed as perpetrators, we do have females who are perpetrators as well. We do have male victims and female victims. How do we get these four groups of people, because they are very different, how do we get all four of them to have healthy discussions that lead us to a point where we can start to see the reduction in cases of gender-based violence? Tembani, I'll start with you.
Okay, so I think the kinds of solutions that we need here are very structural. We need to respond to the kind of structures that have been teaching individuals to be victimizers, and also allow accepting women to put on their oppression with like a crown, right? So I think it now speaks to maybe number one, going back to schools and making sure that these are things that are ingrained in our education. It speaks secondly to even engaging spaces where we grow up as young people, making sure that the information is out there. Because particularly when you grow up in these school setups, you find that there are always instances that entrench gender differences between men and women, that a woman is supposed to do this, a man cannot. That is something that needs to be addressed. Particularly, we also need to look into the things that as youths we are into, things such as social media. We need to make sure that there's always these social media campaigns. And most importantly, as a peer educator myself, as a man, I also have a responsibility to go out there and take care of my own, take care of other men and other women, my sisters and my brothers. So it means that we also need more individuals who are trained and capacitated to understand the nuances of gender-based violence, and to also go out there and preach the same message and also give access to our individuals out there.
All right, beloved?
Okay, as what Tembani has said, we need to build certain structures, and these structures should do initiatives that promote enough knowledge and disseminate enough knowledge to men and women to know that their counterparts have got values and they should respect them. For example, let's look at ways that we can take to put them, to disseminate the message. We can do campaigns, we can disseminate the information through sporting activities and different shows where we allow the community, or the boys, the girls, and women, and as well as men, to participate in those activities. Because if we are not going to involve those who are being victimized in the action, we are going to do all this in vain, and we are not going to get results because they are not part of what we are doing. So I think involving them to be part of whatever that we are putting forward in order to eradicate GBV is much essential.
All right. And finally, unfortunately, we are out of time. But Sendisa, let me ask you to wrap this up for us. Male involvement in the end of gender-based violence. How do we push for more of our young men, our fathers and brothers, to get involved in this discussion openly and freely?
Yeah, I think basically there are two layers. I would say the first layer is the community system strengthening, where we find our men as fathers, our men as pastors, our men as teachers, our men as brothers. So at that level, we should engage men with tailored models. For example, Mugota, in reaching out to men who are very different, using different approaches. At police level, we should be able to have our policymakers being able to support laws that protect the rights of men and women within our communities. Also, policymakers who can create curriculum or educational approaches that will allow men and women to relate, to learn about how each other feel, how to protect each other's dignities, human rights, so that ultimately everyone goes through the education system, be it primary, secondary, or tertiary. So the product from those institutions should be people who understand equality and equity.
All right, thank you very much. Now, of course, today we were looking beyond the lens of the perpetrator, looking at men's roles in ending gender-based violence. A very enlightening discussion. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but please do make sure that you are sending in your opinions via our social media platforms and that you continue to be involved in this discussion, even within your groups. Now, this discussion was brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network in partnership with the Spotlight Initiative, the Swedish Embassy, UNFPA, and Say What. My name is Candice Mwakaliele. Be kind to each other, but be kinder still to yourselves. We'll see you next time.